From the Republic Media Network headquarters, it's time for Arnab Goswami on the debate. Arnab Goswami on the debate.
And now time for the nation's sharpest opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, just a couple of hours ago, India and China held their first ever bilateral meeting in over 5 years. And while many are tonight either skeptical or rejoicing by the fact that the talks have begun, I, for one, am a total realist and a pragmatist vis-a-vis China, which is why I believe that while it is a good thing that India and China are finally talking, we must also never forget that there is a lot of work to be done to restore the balance. Of course, to those who have minutely studied the statements crafted today, will understand that India has not taken the bait this time. India has made it amply clear that until and unless there is strict adherence to the disengagement along the LAC, no normalization talks can proceed. This was also reflected in the statement of the Indian Army's chief yesterday. But the most important takeaway for the Chinese side from this bilateral meeting has to be the fact that this is not the same country they are dealing with, whom they had met in Mamallapuram in 2019. This is a country whose Prime Minister is in his third term and who has seen through over a decade of first-class diplomacy, from free trade agreements to surgical strikes to regional coalitions, and not just leading but winning over support from all sides in a multipolar world. Which is why it is in the best interest of China to go back to the pre-galwan situation in India for its own sake. Because in a matter of just 3 to 4 years, India will become the third largest economy in the world, and it is just going to be just behind China and the US. Ladies and gentlemen, therefore, I believe that at this time it is important for the Chinese to look at what they need to know. Now that we have gone more than half the distance, what do the Chinese need to do? First, the Chinese need to close the trade gap. They need to make serious efforts towards it. Secondly, the Chinese need to stop encouraging terrorism through Pakistan, which is their strategic asset, but they need to know that it is not something that India is going to take lightly. We have already said very clearly to the Pakistanis that talks and terror cannot go hand in hand, which is why if China wants friendship with India, and as the Prime Minister said, have a mature relationship with India, it must stop encouraging the Pakistanis to carry out terror attacks on our soil. Thirdly, they must stop taking a stand at international forums, which is not just anti-India, but which is pro-terrorism, like doing everything possible to protect Masood Azhar. These are pinpricks in the relationship that the Chinese should be very, very conscious that if they want to have a better relationship with India, which is in Asia's interest, which is in global interest, then they need to stop doing those kind of things. Thirdly, the Chinese need to come to terms with India's growth. I think that is the fundamental flaw in the way the Chinese look at India. They must realize that just as they grew at a massive pace in the early 2000s until a few years back, similarly, India's growth, which is pegged at 7-8%, is going to take India to being a 10 trillion economy, 20 trillion economy, 30 trillion economy, and maybe a 40 trillion economy plus by 2047. These are realities, and the Chinese must come to terms with it. Having a hostile relationship with India at this stage will only damage China's interests in the medium to long term. That is why I'd like to begin by saying once again that the Chinese need to be very mature, not aggressive, and realize that we've gone more than half the distance. It is their turn now to respond.
Since 2020, Sino-Indian relations had hit an all-time low after the Galwan Valley clashes. After much speculation, the Ministry of External Affairs confirmed this week that the Modi-Xi bilateral was indeed on the cards during the sidelines of the BRICS summit. This came after both the sides made significant breakthrough on the standoff and disengagement at the line of actual control.
There will be a bilateral meeting held between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping tomorrow, 23rd of October, on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. The exact time and other logistics are being worked out, but the meeting will take place tomorrow.
And after the disengagement talks, significant strides were also made in terms of patrolling of troops along the line of actual control. Both Xi and Modi kicked off the most awaited bilateral with strong statements.
सीमा पर शांति और स्थिरता बनाए रखना हमारी प्राथमिकता रहनी चाहिए। म्यूचुअल ट्रस्ट, म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट और म्यूचुअल सेंसिटिविटी हमारे संबंधों का आधार बने रहना चाहिए।
China and India are both ancient civilizations, major developing countries, and important members of the global South. We are both at a crucial phase in our respective modernization endeavors for both sides to keep to the trend of history and the right direction of our bilateral relations. It's important for both sides to have more communication and cooperation.
Notably, this bilateral meeting was the first in 5 long years. The Foreign Secretary shared more details from the meeting in his post-summit presser.
The two leaders noted that the special representatives on the India-China boundary question have a critical role to play in the resolution of the boundary question and for the maintenance of peace and tranquility in the border areas.
In a big breakthrough, both the sides have relaunched the special representatives' boundary talks, which were stalled after the Galwan Valley clash. As India makes cautious and calculated strides in furthering bilateral ties, will China respond by addressing the trust deficit and becoming more predictable in its conduct?
From Beijing this evening, we have with us Einar Tangen, well-known commentator from Beijing. Zhu Qindo is a senior political analyst and journalist and a senior fellow at the Pangoal Institution from Beijing. Thank you very much, Mr. Qindo. And Savio Rodriguez,
thank you.
Founder and editor-in-chief of Goa Chronicle, and General G.D. Bakshi, well-known defense expert from India, are with us this evening. Let me start with you, Einar. How do you view today's meeting? I do not think personally it is only symbolic. I think both sides must have given deep thought before the meeting happens at a Narendra Modi, Xi Jinping level. So what is the significance of the fact that they have met strategically?
Well, strategically, it's just showing that there's a thaw in the relationship, obviously, and that they want to get on with things. I mean, there have been a number of geopolitical things that have happened. I think Modi felt very strongly that the U.S. had interfered in his election. He announced that he was going to go see Putin. There was the optics of the hug with Putin. He also said that he was going to instruct Jaishankar to make progress on the border issue. After that, you had a situation where all of a sudden everyone's saying that India is the #2 provider of sensitive equipment to Russia, and then you had Bangladesh, where there's some suspicion that the U.S. was involved. I think this has caused not a pivot, but it is a warning to Washington that Narendra Modi is no Bong Bong Marcos, and India is not the Philippines, and that they will go their own way. So at this point, it's very positive for the India-China side. I don't think Washington's very happy.
At the same time, my view is, Einar, that I don't disagree with all of the points that you have made, maybe some to degrees of extent. I also believe that it is much in China's interest, in terms of timing, to help build the thaw, given the Chinese direction of the Chinese economy and China's own geostrategic and military interests. And I'd like to invite General G.D. Bakshi to give his take on how he views this meeting and what are the Chinese imperatives behind this meeting. Why would the Chinese want to have this meeting and a thaw in the first place, General Bakshi?
Absolutely, Arnab. The simple fact is that strategically, China has always gone by the principle of one strategic direction. Currently, their strategic direction is focused towards Taiwan, towards the South China Sea, and it does not suit them to have problems on their western flank when they are so heavily engaged with the Taiwanese, with the Americans, with the Japanese, Koreans, Filipinos, on the Taiwan issue, on the South China Sea issue. There are also the aspects of the Chinese economy. And to that extent, the need for a thaw, I think, is fairly mutual. For once, I agree with my Chinese interlocutors that yes, there is an aspect of the very undue hostility that the United States of America has been displaying towards India of late. The coup in Bangladesh, the quest for a base in the Bay of Bengal in the Martins Island. Also, the support to Khalistan via the Five Eyes, via Canada. Khalistani terrorists. This is hardly a friendly act. And then, of course, we had the stab in the back with the jet engines. So I think it is about time that India is a power which is autonomous, which values its autonomy, its autarky, and it has also given a clear message in this quest for a thaw. We would like to see how it goes. We would like to see trust develop. But the simple fact is that this is a signal to the rest of the world that India doesn't like to be pushed. We don't like being pushed by anyone, for that matter.
And today's meeting is historic, in my view. Consider the significance of this meeting. The meeting is between the world's most populous nation and the leader of the world's second most populous nation. The meeting is between the world's largest democracy and soon to be third largest economy and the world's second largest economy. The meeting is between the two most powerful countries of Asia. So I don't think it can go unnoticed. However, Mr. Quindo, we in India here believe that there are certain steps the Chinese must take. First, we believe that when two such large countries have so much at stake for our people, our economies, and our future, then we must stop letting small countries like Pakistan, which are known supporters of terrorism, become pawns in the process. I truly believe that China must not support terrorist groups or terrorists based in Pakistan and has enough leverage over Pakistan today to make the Pakistanis stop doing so. But will that happen, Mr. Quindo? Because if it happens, it can contribute a great deal towards bringing our two countries together.
Thank you for having me. First of all, let me share my thoughts on this very important meeting between two leaders. I think it is in India's interest as much as in Chinese interest. Remember, in my own thing, I would say India is one of the very few truly independent nations. Every move it makes in terms of foreign policy making, it is in line with Indian interests, national interests of Indian people. And so are the Chinese, I think. evidence in this case. And secondly, you mentioned about the terrorism. I agree with you to a certain degree. For example, the recent example is the Chinese workers actually were also injured and killed in the terror attack inside Pakistan. So I think the terrorism, obviously, the three countries need to talk to each other to find a way to deal with those terrorists, wherever they are from. And we need to, obviously, somewhere, they get their resources, either financially and also arms, ammunitions. So that's a problem, I think, posed to India, posed to China, posed to Pakistan. And as to for the three countries' relationship, China is fully ready, fully welcome. Like if there's any thought of relationship between Pakistan and India, if there's a peace and tranquility in the entire South Asia, that would be the greatest news for Shanghai Cooperation Organization, for the BRICS group, because both India and Pakistan are part of the two groups. So that's also one of the best stories for the developing world, because without resolving this problem, and there's a solidarity problem, that would be a damage to this multipolar system.
Yeah, but Mr. Quindo, I hope you appreciate the fact that India and Pakistan are not at the same level, besides which Pakistan's history and record of being a terror supporter, a country which gave refuge to Osama bin Laden, and where hundreds of terrorist groups are operating as a quasi-government, put it in a very different situation. And therefore, it is not possible for India to talk to Pakistan on issues of terrorism. I was only referring and alluding to the fact that China should not be standing in the way of supporting hijackers like Masood Azhar and saying that we'll stand with Pakistan at the UN Security Council to stop naming him as a designated terrorist. Though I believe these are smaller issues, these are significant issues. I would now like to bring the attention to another issue, which is our continuing trade imbalance. And I'd like Savio to comment on that. Everything does boil down to the economy, and this trade imbalance and some trade barriers that the Chinese put, very, very protectionist measures, if those are lifted, then perhaps, this process of normalization would speed up if these non-tariff barriers in the Chinese market could go, if the huge trade deficit of almost $85 billion could be reduced, if not eliminated. Savio, would you like to comment on that?
Arnab, I think the most important aspect of what has happened today are two of the world's most promising leaders actually coming together to resolve their concerns and move ahead in a unified fashion. And we're not talking just about two leaders. We are talking about two ancient civilizations coming from Asia, having concerns that they had over a period of time and finding a way to resolve these concerns. For a very long time, most of the geopolitics controlled around the world has been controlled by countries out of the West. But it is now time that you're seeing Asian countries, countries like India and China, that are dominating the kind of political movement that is happening globally. And that is required because for centuries the world has been dominated by Western philosophies and ideologies and political lingo. It is time the world opens its eyes to Eastern philosophies, Eastern's ways of doing it. And that is why, in my humble opinion, I think India and China, irrespective of the differences that need to be ironed out, is setting a stage for the rise of the Eastern philosophies, and slowly the Western idea of the world is going to be diluted as these two nations grow stronger. Having said that, the most important thing in any relationship is trust. And trust is the most important thing India and China have to build together. And trust starts with different parameters. The first parameter being security, which is the issue of terrorism that you rightly highlighted. China needs to stop supporting Pakistan or any of their affiliates working with terrorism. The second is the trade. It is important for China to understand that in order for this relationship to strengthen, the trade deficit itself needs to come down. And India and China must be working compatibly together to deal with the Western onslaught that is happening in all the other countries that India and China want to get a foothold in. So trust is going to take time. What is important is for India and China to realize that they are ancient civilizations which had a philosophy that worked much before the Western philosophies came in. And it's time for the world to wake up to the synergies that Eastern philosophy can bring in geopolitics.
Einar, is China comfortable with India's rise? You know, China had a head start. The Chinese economy has now significantly slowed down, closer to 7%. India is growing at a pace which China was, say, 15 to 20 years back. So there's been a bit of a role reversal. If this continuous rate of growth of the Indian economy continues, then we will go significantly. We could double and quadruple in short periods of time. Einar, my question to you is more basic. You see, today, as opposed to, say, 2014, Indian government and Indian companies will compete with Chinese government and Chinese companies in areas like Africa, where you see China had a head start. Secondly, like you were buying, Chinese were making big real estate investments in the United Kingdom. The biggest investments in the United Kingdom today, are also from Indian companies. We are buying up British companies, growing a big presence. And I'm saying that this is not just in South Africa or parts of Europe or in Britain, it's also going to be in South Asia. So at a fundamental level, isn't it a fact that the Chinese will have to accept that India is here to stay? You know, we'll be a $10 trillion economy before you know it. And nothing can come in the way of that. And instead of, if we work together, this could be a very formidable combination globally. But if we don't, then our mutual competitors could turn this competition into conflict. Competition should not become conflict, Einar, should it?
Well, Arnab, it's curious that you think that China doesn't want India to rise. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Xi Jinping said in 2013, after coming in, he's the president, not the prime minister. He said that the future of the Asian century is going to depend much on China and India being able to work together and to be prosperous. I mean, China is well aware of what the ravages of colonialism did. I mean, India, or what was India today, was 24% of the world's GDP. Before the British came, after they left, it was 4%. Everyone is aware of this. China wants India to succeed.
Then will it support India for a UN Security Council seat? In 1950, sorry to interrupt, but in 1950, India supported China for a UN Security Council seat. Today, in 2024, if the Chinese have come to terms with India's place in the world, shouldn't China openly support India for a UN Security Council seat?
Arnab, you like to put things in terms of transactional terms.
Well, everything is transactional, isn't it? I mean, isn't this a legitimate point? Why would, one second. All this talk about leaders of the global south and all is perfectly all right. But we can't be protectionist about a UN Security Council seat. Why would China not support India for a UNSC seat? What would come in the way?
Okay, and why would India join AUKUS, which is aimed at China? These are independent countries. I'm an American.
You meant Quad, I think. You meant Quad, not AUKUS.
A Quad, yes.
Yes.
But the issue is why do that? It's because it's in India's interest to do this. In terms of the UN Security Council, I don't know what the calculus is there on that. But if somebody who is not friendly towards you, who you do not have a good relationship, says, I want a larger position of power, what would you say to them?
Why would you
the
feel
issue
we're
is
not being
once-
friendly?
once
If we were,
these nations come to terms,
we are being incredibly
then it's
friendly.
easy.
We are being incredibly friendly.
Oh, are you?
Yes, and very competitive.
Yeah, I mean, you're already, the relationship has just started, and you're trying to build trust, and you're already insisting, like a market vendor, that you should get some sort of plus for this.
No, Einar, I think Einar,
This is not a business deal.
Einar,
This is about two civilizations.
Einar, yes,
as
it is
your
about
previous
civilizations. It was
said.
only a question, and I think I wouldn't use such
Yes,
strong
I know
words.
It's a question, but it sounds more like a demand.
But you should
Just
not.
like you saying that the trade deficit would go down, but the trade deficit won't go down because,
Einar, I'll tell you one thing.
frankly,
I'll tell you one thing. See, the thing
do you
is
want
here.
to talk or do you want me
No,
to talk?
I want,
don't
because you
quite
can't get away
understand.
with the comment which you just made. I was making a very polite comment to you. It got so much under your skin that you started saying you're talking like a market vendor.
Look, Arnab, your job is to try to get under people's skins. I was
No,
trying
it's
to
not
point
my
out
job.
to you.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
That's what television is about.
No, it's not.
So,
No, it's not. It's
but
not.
let's talk about
I'm
the
just a
trade
very,
surplus.
I'm just a very involved anchor, and therefore my question to you is: see, if we all accept
I'm
where
very
we are,
involved also.
if we are all accept where we are, things will be so much better. Like we keep emphasizing the fact that, like China is building its border infrastructure, India also will, and it is not aimed at you. The point is, we did not build our
I'm an
border
American. It's
infrastructure in the
certainly not
past,
aimed at me.
and it's not aimed at the Chinese. It's just aimed at
then
making India
I
a
mean,
stronger
Look, both
nation.
sides have a trust deficit. You brought this out. And because they have a trust deficit, both sides have been, in essence, building up along their different borders. If India builds a road, the Chinese build a road. If the Chinese build a road, the Indians build a road. I mean, this is the kind of tit for tat that's there.
Yeah.
But I just want to address this trade deficit issue.
Can I make a
If
small comment
India
responding to
wasn't-
that? Just to
if
what your last
India
point
wasn't-
was. You said if India builds a road, China builds a road, China builds a road, India builds a road. Today, yes, but not 20 years back. Now, we have built, and I'm significantly telling you, almost 5,000 kilometers of border roads in 6 years. We have not done that in the past, and I think where the Chinese will do good is to appreciate that we will continue to do so. And it's not aimed at you.
That is your right, as
Yes.
long as it's on your areas that aren't disputed. If you put
Absolutely.
it in areas that are disputed, or it looks like you're trying to get some sort of military advantage, of course the other side is going to respond. I don't know why that would be surprising.
Well, then
to
in
you.
that case, may I ask you another question, please, Einar? Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is disputed, but the CPEC runs through it. Why does it run through disputed territory?
Well, certainly wasn't because it was disputed
I got you
territory.
on
It
that
ran
one.
through there because that
I
was
got
the
you on
best
that one.
and most efficient route to go through.
I got you on that one.
What do you mean you got me on that?
I got you because it's a relevant point I
It's
made.
childish. You're absolutely childish.
No, I'm asking you.
The issue here is why did it go through? And that's because geographically it's the best route. How is that gotcha?
No, but it's a disputed territory.
So what? There are many disputed territories. The
Okay.
Indian side has been putting roads on areas that are disputed as
okay,
well.
I take so there is going to be
kind of nonsense about
there's going to be a
disputed.
difference of opinion. That's clear to me. But I think at the same time, despite the difference of opinion, General Bakshi, I would not take away at all the global significance of today's meeting. I would still continue to emphasize on the global significance of today's meeting. And I truly believe, General Bakshi, that India and China coming together pragmatically, ending the thaw, is actually a really, really good move. And even people like Einar and me who obviously disagree on many fundamentals will agree on that one. And so will you, General Bakshi. It's a big step forward. The world has to move towards multipolarity, and that can't happen if India and China don't do business together. General Bakshi.
Absolutely, Arnab, you are spot on. The significance of today's event, outreach of India and China, two great ancient civilizations of Asia to one another, is a unique one-off event. It doesn't happen every day. It is the beginning of a thaw. I would say very tentative initial
beginning of
steps,
a thaw, well phrased.
but the beginning of a thaw.
Yeah.
And if we go down the trust road, and what I would like to tell our Chinese interlocutors is that it helps in trying to thaw relation it helps to face reality squarely. One of the things that pinches India, and it is best that you know, has been your unequivocal support to Pakistan. The Pakistan army has always been a poodle of the American military, of the American Pentagon. They have just, joined the CIA in overthrowing a legitimately elected government in Bangladesh. I think we would also like to caution you that this one of the greatest irritants in India-China relationships has been the Chinese tendency to support Pakistan and its terrorist enterprises, right? But when we begin the beginnings of a thaw, I think we should confront these things head on. And that is what will get us to a pragmatic kind of a reconciliation, and not that one that buries things under the carpet.
I think it's also an opportunity, I would say.
Chinese interlocutor.
Yeah, it's an opportunity, Mr. Quindo. I want to go back to you. It's also an opportunity for Chinese diplomacy to stand out as different from the Americans. You know, the Americans have always had this diplomacy, you're with us or you're against us kind of approach, you know, which doesn't make sense to us. The Chinese needn't have that perspective, which is why when Einar asked, you know, you're with the Quad, which is against us, I mean, that argument goes against the principle of multipolarity. To expect the world's most populous nation not to work with all would not be pragmatic. Just as we would not expect you not to work with the Chinese on, with the Americans on economic issues. So maybe a new realism, perhaps, is that possible, you think, as an analyst?
Well, I think, both countries have always demonstrated to a certain degree, obviously, of pragmatism. You know, without such a practical approach, I don't think there will be the point we are reaching, that is the thaw of our relationship. Remember, this is very important so that both countries can put aside the disputes and focus on their own economic development and also explore the opportunities of working together economically. This is also important strategically, I think, from the global perspective.
Absolutely.
Remember, Washington has been trying to use India against China, through Quad or whatever framework there. But now I think India showed that it is an independent country. It will do everything that's in line with its national interests.
Yes.
Can I also want to, address this issue you mentioned about the trade deficit? I think that, India is not alone in somehow having a problem with the deficit, and somehow people view that as a big problem.
Yes.
The deficit is like, I buy something from you. I paid like $100 US to you. You sell me a T-shirt, and then I'm in deficit. But is that equal or unequal? It's equal because I get my T-shirt, you get your dollars. So I don't think trade is always mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
If you don't need the Chinese products, you won't buy.
No.
That's it, right?
No,
if you sell product to China, if China needs it, China will buy.
Yes.
I mean, that's,
Yes.
If you want to narrow, people often say reduce its deficit, sell more, export more to the Chinese market.
Yeah.
Explore the Chinese market.
Absolutely. We would like to explore the Chinese market. And I think, the economic survey this year, Mr. Quindo, in India, dropped a hint of normalization by making a case that getting foreign direct investment from China can help India improve its participation in global supply chains through exports. So we are very practical about it. Very, very practical about it.
Very practical.
Yeah, very practical. We all have to be practical to grow. Otherwise, that's the new approach in India, Mr. Quindo. Very, very practical government. And as Einar said, totally national interest first. One last point. I believe we must emphasize, and with the visuals on air, that this meeting happening, a lot of work has gone behind it. Even the fact that this meeting has happened is itself a success. And I agree with General Bakshi, it's not the thaw, it's the beginning of the thaw. But the world will notice that getting these two leaders to meet, shake hands, and start the bilateral process, a huge amount of work has gone behind that, I'm sure. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on that very interesting conversation. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And viewers.